The cup was inches from her lips. Steam rose in delicate spirals. Chamomile, her favorite. Then a voice tore through the silence like a gunshot. "Don't drink it, Mrs. Carson." Elena Carson froze, the porcelain cup trembling in her hand. She looked up to find her house manager, Marcus Webb, standing in her bedroom doorway, his chest heaving, his face twisted with something that looked like terror. "What are you talking about?" Elena asked, her voice sharp. Behind Marcus, footsteps thundered down the hallway. Her husband, David, appeared, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell is going on?" David demanded. Marcus didn't move, his eyes locked on the cup in Elena's hand. "That tea is poisoned," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the earthquake in his chest. But Marcus didn't move. He looked at Elena, and something in his expression made her hesitate. "I saw him put something in it," Marcus said quietly. "A vial. 3 drops. He took it out of his pocket." The room went silent. Elena looked down at the cup, then at David, and for the first time in 8 years of marriage, she saw her husband's face go pale. Marcus Webb moved through the Carson estate like a man who understood his place in the world, not invisible, but unobtrusive, there when needed, gone when not. The mansion was a monument to wealth, Connecticut's most exclusive neighborhood, 12 acres behind iron gates, Italian marble floors that gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Elena Carson had built her retail empire from a single Boston storefront into a 3-continent operation. Her name appeared regularly in Forbes. When she walked into boardrooms, people straightened their spines. Marcus was just the help. He'd taken the job 6 weeks ago when his savings ran out. Single father, hospitality background, needed the money to keep his 8-year-old son fed and housed. The agency sent him, and Elena hired him on the spot. Professional, discreet, references checked. David Carson hated him immediately. Marcus noticed it the first week. The way David's jaw tightened when Marcus entered a room. The comments about Marcus's clothes, his posture, the way he set the table. The questions about why Elena hired him instead of a woman. "It's inappropriate," David had said one morning, loud enough for Marcus to hear. "Having a man around all the time." Elena had ignored him, but Marcus understood. He'd seen men like David before, men who wore charm like a mask and took it off when no one was looking. Men who smiled for the cameras but turned cold behind closed doors. David didn't work, didn't build anything. He'd married Elena 8 years ago when his family's money dried up, and he'd been living off her success ever since. Marcus could see the resentment burning behind David's eyes every time Elena made another deal, bought another property, earned another billion. And lately, there was someone else. Her name was Sienna. She started showing up 3 weeks after Marcus began working. Mid-20s, dark hair, sharp smile. David introduced her as his personal assistant, though he never explained what business she was assisting with. Sienna came to the house on weekday afternoons, always when Eleanor was at the office. She and David would disappear into his study and lock the door. Marcus noticed because it was his job to notice. Who came and went, when meals needed to be prepared, when rooms needed to be cleaned. At first he assumed it was an affair, not his business. But then he heard something that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon. Marcus was dusting the hallway outside David's study. The door was closed, but the voices inside carried. David laughed, low and satisfied. "She'll never see it coming," David said. Sienna responded, but Marcus couldn't make out the words. He moved closer, his pulse quickening. "It has to look natural," David continued. "No one can suspect anything. If they think it's foul play, everything falls apart." Marcus felt ice spread through his chest. "Too risky," Sienna's voice, clearer now. It's not risky if we do it right, David cut her off. She has everything in her name, the company, the accounts, the properties. If something happens to her, it all comes to me. We just have to be patient. Marcus stepped back from the door, his heart hammering. If something happens to her. He walked quickly to the kitchen and gripped the edge of the counter, his hands shaking. He told himself he'd misheard. Told himself they were talking about a business deal, a lawsuit, anything else. But the words kept repeating in his mind. If something happens to her. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus paid attention. He watched David and Sienna when they were together. He listened when they spoke. He started piecing things together. They were planning something. He didn't know exactly what, but he knew it involved Elena. He knew it involved money, and he knew it involved making her death look like an accident. One afternoon, Marcus was cleaning upstairs when he heard David's voice coming from the guest bedroom. The door was slightly open. Marcus moved closer. David was on the phone, his tone clipped and impatient. I need something that won't show up in an autopsy. Something that looks like a heart attack or a stroke. Pause. No, I don't care how much it costs. Just make sure it works. Marcus felt his blood turn to stone. He backed away from the door and went downstairs. He sat in the staff room staring at the wall. He should call the police. But what would he say? That he overheard a phone conversation? That he thought his employer's husband was planning to kill her? They'd ask for proof. He had none. They'd ask why he waited so long. He had no good answer. And if he told Elena without proof, she'd think he was lying. She'd fire him. David would know someone had reported him, and Marcus would lose everything. This job, his income, his ability to care for his son. But if he stayed silent, Elena would die. Marcus made a decision. He would stay, he would watch, he would gather evidence, and when the time came, he would stop it. From that moment on, Marcus became more than a house manager. He became a silent guardian. He started keeping a small notebook in his pocket. He wrote down dates, times, details, the days Sienna visited and how long she stayed, the names David mentioned on the phone, every locked door, every whispered conversation. David didn't notice. He was too confident, too focused on his plan. He believed Marcus was just a servant, someone who cleaned floors and made coffee, someone who didn't matter. But Marcus saw everything, and he was the only person in that house who knew what was coming. David's behavior shifted. He started asking Elena questions he'd never cared about before. What time is your meeting tomorrow? Elena would glance up from her tablet. 9:30. Why? Just curious. Want to make sure I'm home when you are. It sounded thoughtful, caring, but Marcus knew better. David was tracking Elena's schedule with precision. He wanted to know when she'd be tired, when she'd be vulnerable, when she'd be alone. Marcus kept his head down and listened. He added every detail to his notebook. The pattern was forming. David was waiting for the perfect moment. 2 weeks later, David got what he needed. Marcus was folding laundry when he heard the front door open. It was 3 in the afternoon. Elena was at work. David should have been out. Marcus moved quietly to the hallway. David was there. So was Sienna. She was holding a small shopping bag. They moved quickly toward the study and closed the door. Marcus set down the laundry and moved closer. He stood outside the study and listened. Did you get it? David asked, voice low but urgent. Yes, Sienna replied. But I don't like this. What if something goes wrong? Nothing will go wrong. This is exactly what we talked about. No smell, no taste. It looks like a heart attack. The coroner won't find anything unusual. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. How much do you use? Sienna asked. Just a few drops. That's all it takes. She won't feel anything. She'll just stop. There was a rustling sound, paper being unwrapped. When are you going to do it? Soon. I'm waiting for the right moment. She's been stressed lately. Headaches. When it happens, everyone will think it was natural. Marcus stepped back from the door, his heart hammering. David had the poison. It was real now, not just a plan anymore. It was happening. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay on the cot in the staff room, staring at the ceiling. Every sound made him jump. He kept imagining David sneaking into Elena's room, pouring poison into a glass of water by her bedside. At 2 a.m, Marcus got up and walked through the dark house. He went upstairs and stood outside Elena's bedroom door. He listened. He heard her breathing. She was alive. Safe. For now. Marcus went back downstairs and pulled out his notebook. He wrote down everything he'd heard that afternoon. Every word, every detail. If something happened to Elena, at least there'd be a record. But Marcus realized that wasn't enough. A notebook wouldn't save her. It would only serve as evidence after she was already dead. He needed to catch David in the act. He needed proof that couldn't be denied. The next evening, David went out for dinner. Elena was working late. The house was empty except for Marcus. Marcus stood outside the study door, his hands sweating. He knew this was a violation, knew that if David came home and caught him, it would be over. But he was running out of time. He opened the door and stepped inside. The study was neat. Mahogany desk, leather chair, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Marcus moved quickly, opening drawers one by one. Papers, pens, old receipts, nothing unusual. He checked cabinets, looked behind books, searched the closet. Nothing. Marcus stood in the middle of the room, frustrated. The poison was here. It had to be. Then he heard it, a sound outside. Footsteps on gravel, a car door closing. Marcus's heart stopped. He turned off the desk lamp and hurried out, closing the door quietly behind him. He walked quickly to the kitchen and started washing dishes, his hands shaking. David came through the front door a minute later. He walked past the kitchen without looking at Marcus. Marcus exhaled. He hadn't been caught, but he hadn't found the poison either. The opportunity David had been waiting for finally arrived. Eleanor came home late on a Thursday evening. She looked exhausted, pale face, dark circles under her eyes. She'd just returned from Chicago. A deal she'd been working on for months had fallen through. She'd lost millions. The board was furious. Marcus was in the kitchen when she walked in. She didn't say hello, just went straight upstairs. David was waiting in the living room. He watched her climb the stairs. Then he smiled. Marcus saw that smile. It made his skin crawl. David waited 10 minutes. Then he went into the kitchen. Marcus was wiping down the counters. David didn't acknowledge him. He opened the cabinet and took out a teapot, filled it with water, set it on the stove. Marcus kept working, but his eyes never left David. David took a teacup from the shelf, opened a drawer and pulled out a small tin of chamomile tea. He scooped the leaves into a strainer and placed it in the cup. Then he reached into his pocket. Marcus froze. David pulled out a tiny glass vial, no bigger than his thumb. The liquid inside was clear. He glanced over his shoulder. Marcus immediately looked down, scrubbing at an invisible stain. David turned back to the cup. He unscrewed the cap and tilted the vial. 3 drops fell into the empty cup. He screwed the cap back on and slipped the vial into his pocket. The kettle began to whistle. David poured the hot water into the cup. The tea leaves swirled. The poison dissolved instantly. There was no color, no smell, nothing. David picked up the cup and walked out of the kitchen. Marcus stood frozen for 3 seconds. Then he moved. He followed David into the hallway, keeping his distance. David climbed the stairs. Marcus waited, then followed. David walked down the hallway toward Eleanor's bedroom. Marcus stayed in the shadows. David knocked on the door. "Come in," Elena's voice from inside. David opened the door and stepped inside. "I brought you some tea. Thought it might help with your headache." Elena's voice was tired. "Thank you." Marcus heard footsteps, heard the sound of a cup being set down. "I'll drink it in a minute. I just need to finish this email." "Take your time." Marcus heard the door open. David stepped out into the hallway and walked back toward the stairs. He didn't see Marcus standing in the shadows. Marcus waited until David was gone. Then he moved. He couldn't burst in without proof. If he was wrong, he'd be fired. But if he was right and did nothing, Elena would be dead in minutes. He had to catch David in the act. Marcus walked quickly to the stairs. He looked down and saw David entering his study. Marcus turned and went back to Elena's room. He stood outside the door and listened. He heard typing, heard Elena sigh, heard the cup being lifted from the table. He couldn't wait any longer. Marcus knocked on the door, hard, urgent. "What is it?" Elena's voice from inside. Marcus didn't answer. He knocked again. The door opened. Elena stood there, holding the teacup in her hand. She looked annoyed. "Marcus, what?" Marcus saw the cup, saw her fingers wrapped around it, saw her lifting it toward her lips. "Don't drink it, Mrs. Carson." Elena stopped, her hand frozen in midair. The cup hovered inches from her mouth. "What are you talking about?" Before Marcus could answer, footsteps thundered down the hallway. David appeared, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell is going on?" David demanded. Marcus didn't move. He kept his eyes on the cup. "That tea is poisoned." Elena stared at him. "What?" David laughed, harsh, incredulous. "Are you insane? Get out of here." Marcus didn't move. He looked at Elena. "I saw him put something in the cup. A vial. 3 drops. He took it out of his pocket." Elena's expression shifted. She looked down at the cup, then at David. David's face went pale, but he recovered quickly. "This is absurd. He's lying." "Check his pocket," Marcus said, voice steady. Elena's eyes narrowed. She looked at David. "Empty your pockets." David's jaw tightened. "You're going to believe him over me?" "Empty your pockets," Elena repeated, voice like steel. David hesitated. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "There. Happy?" "The other pocket," Marcus said. David glared at him. "I don't have to—" "Show me," Elena said, voice rising. David reached into his other pocket, pulled out his wallet, keys, a pen, held them up. "See? Nothing." Marcus shook his head. "He has an inside pocket. In his jacket." Elena stepped forward. "Give me your jacket." David took a step back. "This is ridiculous." Elena set the teacup down on the dresser and walked toward him. "Give me your jacket." David's face twisted. For a moment he looked like he might run. Then he tried a different approach. His expression softened. He held up his hands. "Elena, please. You know me. You've known me for 8 years. Do you really think I would hurt you?" Elena's face was stone. "The jacket, David." David's eyes darted to Marcus, then back to Elena. "He's trying to ruin us. Can't you see that? Maybe he's jealous. Maybe he wants—" "Now," Elena said coldly. David realized he was trapped. His shoulders sagged. He slowly took off his jacket and handed it to Elena. Elena searched the pockets, found nothing in the outer ones. Then she felt along the lining. Her fingers stopped. She looked up at David. She reached into the inner pocket and pulled out a small glass vial. The liquid inside was clear. The room went silent. Elena stared at the vial. Then she looked at David. "What is this?" David opened his mouth, but no words came out. "Tell me what this is, David." David's hands were shaking. It's just, I wasn't going to—" "You poisoned my tea," Elena whispered, voice filled with disbelief. "You were going to kill me." David's face twisted with desperation. He dropped to his knees. "Elena, please, let me explain. I was under so much pressure. The debts, the money, everything in your name. I felt like nothing. I made a mistake. Please." Elena looked down at him, her face white, her hand holding the vial trembling. "You tried to murder me because you felt inadequate." David reached for her, but Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between them. David looked up at Marcus with pure hatred. "This is your fault," David hissed. "You should have minded your own business." Marcus didn't respond. He just stood there, solid, unmovable. Elena's voice cut through the air. "Get away from me!" David looked back at her. "Elena, get out of this room right now," Elena said, voice shaking with rage. David stood slowly, face wet with tears. "Please, just listen. Get out!" Elena screamed. At that moment, there was a sound from the doorway. Sienna stood there, her face pale. She must have let herself in with the key David had given her. She looked at the vial in Elena's hand, looked at David on his knees. "Oh, God," Sienna whispered. Elena turned to her. "Who are you?" Sienna's eyes widened. She looked at David. "You said no one would know. You said it would look natural. You said—" "Shut up!" David shouted, but Sienna was panicking now. The words poured out. "I didn't want to do it. He said you were cruel to him. He said you controlled everything. He said once you were gone we could be together. He said—" "I said shut up!" David lunged toward Sienna. Marcus moved instantly. He grabbed David's arm and pulled him back. David struggled, but Marcus was stronger. He held David firmly. Elena stared at Sienna. "You helped him." Sienna started crying. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't think he would actually do it. I thought he was just talking." Elena's face hardened. She looked at Marcus. "Call the police." The police arrived within 20 minutes. Detective Patterson, a woman in her 40s, took charge immediately. She bagged the vial and the teacup as evidence. She questioned Elena, Marcus, David, and Sienna separately. David didn't resist arrest. He sat in the back of the patrol car, staring straight ahead, his face blank. Sienna was still crying when they handcuffed her. "This wasn't my idea," she kept saying. "He made me do it." David finally looked at her, his expression cold. "Shut up." The media descended within hours. Cameras lined the street. Reporters shouted questions. Marcus refused all interviews. He didn't want his face on television. He just wanted to do his job and take care of his son. The trial took place 4 months later. Marcus testified calmly, describing everything he'd seen and heard. The forensics report confirmed it all. The liquid in the vial was cyanide. The tea contained a lethal dose. Text messages between David and Sienna showed months of planning. Sienna testified against David in exchange for a reduced sentence. The jury took less than 3 hours. David was found guilty of attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder, sentenced to 30 years. Sienna received 15 years. Life slowly returned to normal. The reporters stopped calling. The cameras stopped following. The story faded. Elena filed for divorce. It was finalized within weeks. Marcus continued working. He didn't ask for recognition. He didn't ask for anything. But Elena didn't forget. One afternoon, she called Marcus into her office. "Sit down." Marcus sat. Elena folded her hands. "I owe you my life." Marcus shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." Elena smiled faintly. "Yes, I do, and I won't forget it." She leaned back in her chair. "The press wanted to interview you. They offered a lot of money." Marcus looked up. "I'm not interested." "I know. That's why I made sure they stopped asking." Marcus felt a weight lift from his chest. "Thank you." Elena's voice was quiet but firm. "You did the right thing. Not many people would have." Marcus stood. "I should get back to work." Elena watched him walk toward the door. Before he could leave, she spoke again. "Marcus." He turned. "I'll never forget what you did." Marcus nodded. "I just did what was right." He left the office and closed the door behind him. He walked down the hallway and returned to his duties. He didn't need praise. He didn't need recognition. He had saved a life, and that was enough.